Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines. US President Donald Trump's tariffs on his three largest trading partners has kicked off a trade war. From today, Mexico and Canada will face 25% duties on all exports to the US. While Chinese tariffs stand at 20%, retaliatory action has been announced. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has paused all military aid to Ukraine days after his White House showdown with President Zelensky. Meanwhile, the White House is reportedly looking at options to ease sanctions on Russia, imposed following the invasion of Ukraine. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Hamas of consequences it cannot imagine if hostages are not released. Meanwhile, an emergency summit of Arab leaders has taken place amid the blocking of aid into the region. A 40-year-old German has been identified as a suspect in the Mannheim car ramming attack, which killed 2 people. The suspect has not been questioned yet, having received medical treatment after shooting a blank firing gun into his mouth. The Trump administration has suspended all US military aid to Ukraine, blocking billions in crucial shipments. This comes after a heated White House exchange where President Trump warned Ukrainian President Zelensky of risking World War III. A senior official told Fox News the aid suspension is only a temporary pause, not a permanent end. The decision followed a high-level White House meeting with key figures like Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So far, the U.S. Congress has approved $175 billion in total assistance for Ukraine since Russia's invasion in 2022, but new aid under Trump remains unlikely. Reports also suggest the administration is planning to restore ties with Russia and lift sanctions on the Kremlin. We are joined by 3 guests for further discussion on this topic. Alexander Krayev, senior lecturer at Kiev-Moldya Academy, expert at Ukrainian prison think tank located in Kiev. We're also joined by Andrea Lucidi, war reporter located in Moscow, Russia. And we're also joined by Ross Feingold, political risk analyst located in Taipei, Taiwan. Alexander, I wanted to come to you first in this discussion. How do the people of Ukraine interpret this recent decision from the US to halt military aid to Ukraine? Do you think it increases pressure on Ukraine to have direct negotiations in Russia for a peace deal?
That's definitely a pressure leverage. That's definitely something Trump is trying to convince the Ukrainian president and Ukrainian government to do. But it's not only about talking to Russia directly. It's not only about negotiation. Let us not forget that the rare earth mineral deal is still not signed. And we still see that Trump is trying to make this deal more profitable for the United States, which is arguably understandable from his side. He is the man of the business. He is the president who proclaimed himself the best deal maker, and definitely this shortage and the temporary halt of this help, first and foremost security help, will definitely put some pressure on Zelensky and Zelensky's team. But at the same time, we should also understand that 2025 is quite different from 2022, because in 2022 Ukraine relied on 76% of all military shipments only from the United States. But this year 40% of the necessary equipment is produced here in Ukraine, 30% is provided by European allies and by other non-European allies, and something between 25 to 32% is provided by the United States. So we definitely understand the necessity and the crucialness of this support from the United States, but at the same time we only see it as a pressure mechanism to put Zelensky at the table, not only with Russia, but also on the rare earth mineral deal.
Andrea Lucidi, the Kremlin suggests that Ukraine should be forced into peace negotiations. What kind of peace? Apologies, I don't believe Andrea has joined us. Ross Feingold, what do you think led to this decision to pause military aid to Ukraine, and what conditions would be needed to be met for it to resume?
Trump campaigned on this, so we have to keep in mind that President Trump, in some ways, is simply cashing in on a campaign promise. He's adhering to what he said during the election campaign, and he did win the election. He does have a mandate from the voters. We could argue about whether it's a strong or a weak mandate, but he did win the election. And the voters clearly supported some of his America First ideas, whether that comes with regard to immigration or with regard to the war between Ukraine and Russia. And so he's simply doing what he said he would do. How to unlock future weapons aid to Ukraine? That's a very good question, and only one person knows the answer. That's President Trump. At a minimum, he probably would want to see that talks have begun. He probably would be convinced if, for example, Russia does something especially vicious, such as an attack by a drone or a missile, kills a large number of Ukrainian civilians. Some kind of shocking event like that might also prompt President Trump to resume the military aid. But otherwise, as a matter of politics, it's not up to the public or TV pundits like us. It's going to be up to President Trump to decide when to resume shipments of weapons to Ukraine.
Yes. Alexander, I'm coming back to you. With European leaders reaffirming their support, can Ukraine realistically sustain its defense without US aid, or is this a turning point in the war and negotiations? Alexander, I believe you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. That's not the first time we have the problems or the shortages with US help. Let us not forget the beginning of the previous year when the Congress halted the additional security packages for more than half a year with all the deliberations on the fiscal policies, budget, etc., etc. So basically, that's not the first time the Ukraine is faced with this situation. But this time we are much more prepared. We do have the better and more qualified support from European leaders. And so definitely Ukraine has a lot more chances this time. That is not to say that American support can be interchanged by the Europeans. The Europe is still trying to catch up with the trends in military production. They are still trying to bring their economies to the necessary level of rearmament and the industrial development. So definitely that will cause a lot of problems for Ukraine. Which is important for us is that the Ukrainian forces are currently on most parts of the front line are on the defense. And the general understanding of the military capability says that the one who is defending spent much less equipment, much less ammo and everything, because defense is much more passive in that regard. So we should understand that if it will not cause direct problems for Ukrainian troops, that will definitely mean that Ukrainian troops will not be able to actively respond. So we should forget about any offensive operation or counteroffensive. We should definitely understand that with the halt of US support, Ukraine will be put on the defensive line with no perspective of recapturing, reconquering and freeing the territories currently under Russian occupation. But once again, the main problem with that is we still need to negotiate, and we still understand that this is not the end deal, as you said. That is not the turning point. It's just another pressure mechanism, which I totally agree with Ross. It was promised by Trump. He thought about it during his election campaign. So that is something that we should have been preparing for. But unfortunately, Ukrainian government have too much hopes in President Trump after the first round of debates.
Ross Feingold, does this policy shift reflect broader American fatigue with the war, or is it simply a strategic move by the Trump administration?
It's fair to say that Americans broadly are fatigued by war. America was fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan for approximately 20 years at a tremendous cost in financial cost, as well as the number of deaths and injuries that the American military incurred in those two wars. So yeah, I think that we could say that the American public has some fatigue. It's hard to say that the Trump administration has some fatigue. They've only been in office for a very brief amount of time, only about 5-6 weeks at this point. But again, they did campaign on ending the war. President Trump was very clear about that. So I think rather than calling it fatigue, we could call it tolerance. The tolerance of the Trump administration for ongoing war with no end in sight in Russia and Ukraine the tolerance level is very limited.
Alexander, is there a fear that this decision will embolden Russia to escalate attacks maybe? Have the Ukrainian people seen signs of increased Russian offensive following this announcement?
We definitely did see the increase in not only in offensive on the ground, because the Russian army, although losing more than a brigade per week, they're still trying to advance with limited success. But if we speak about the civilian population, if we speak about the terror attacks that are still constantly going on in Ukraine with the Iranian Shahed drones, with ballistic missiles, we definitely did see the increase in those. For example, during the last 2 weeks, even in the capital city in Kiev, where I'm currently at, we did see 3 biggest missile and drone attacks for the whole war only during the last 2 weeks. So basically, we did see the increase in terror attacks. We did see the increase in attacks on energy infrastructure, which is definitely aiming at destroying the livelihood and the welfare of Ukrainian population in order to press the Ukrainian government for peace talks. At the same time, having limited success on the front line, we do anticipate that the Russian Federation will increase the terror attack against the Ukrainian population once more, just because lack of definite military success will cause them to address other issues, such as, once again, killing peaceful Ukrainians.
We are also joined by Sergei Dvoryanov. Thank you very much, Sergei, for joining us. I was wondering, Sergei, how does Moscow interpret this decision that the US has halted military aid to Ukraine? And does the Kremlin see this as a victory, or is this just a temporary pause, as this Secretary of State has said?
Thank you so much for your question. First of all, I want to start my speech with explanation of the position of Donald Trump, U.S. administration also as well. Their position is very clear that if Mr. Zelensky, who is right now representative, or unfortunately representative of Ukrainian nation, but not president at all, if he really wants to achieve peace, he should surrender, and he should took all, like we can tell, dedication to Donald Trump like a key person and peacemaker, without any conditions, without like a explanation of his vision or any his mission. That is a very clear position, because it's a question about intention of the current government of Ukraine. But we can see that for Mr. Zelensky is only one chance to be in power, because he doesn't want to listen anything about re-election. And
Yes.
he is very scared about this. Is only one chance to continue. That's why that is his intention to put his nation, his country, to deep conflicts. That's why immediately after meeting with Donald Trump, he approached current UK government and
Yes.
King Charles as well. That's why that is his policy right now. He wants more deep conflict,
Dr.
because it's only
Dvoryanov.
one chance to him be in power.
Dr. Dvoryanov, I was just wondering, does this decision indicate that Western support for Ukraine is waning, or do you expect alternative forms or assistance to continue?
See, actually, unfortunately, European shameless politicians, especially France, Germany, and UK, all of them right now, they have the same like a choice, the same way like Mr. Zelensky, because all of them, they depend on each other. And right now, they of course should support each other, because the current situation with Donald
Yes.
Trump, when he completely turned the policy, is a big challenger for all of them. That's why we can see that, of course, they will try their level best to increase this conflict and to supply more weapons. And that is only one chance.
Yes.
But of course, I believe that people-to-people diplomacy can be very useful and effective during this time. And we should start to negotiate peace with all our efforts.
Yes, as Dr. Dvoryanov said, I want to go to Ross Feingold next. You had Keir Starmer tiptoeing around condemning Trump for the move. France has condemned the move. Ross Feingold, how does this decision impact US credibility among its NATO allies? And how, if moves like this continue, could it affect the US's credibility in geopolitics in general? And how can it affect future military commitments elsewhere, like Taiwan and Israel?
Frankly, the relationship between some of the NATO countries and President Trump is not good. It was not good during the first Trump administration, and nothing that Trump has said or done in his second presidency so far is really going to change that. We see some of the leaders of Europe, most notably Macron and Starmer, who were both recently at the White House. They try to put a best face on their meetings. They smile, and they seem to want to give the image that they get along with Trump. But clearly, there's a gap opening up between European expectations and desires with regard to supporting Ukraine and what President Trump is prepared to do at the moment. I would expect that those relationships to become increasingly tense in the short or even over the long term, even if there wasn't this issue of whether or not to support Ukraine. The issue about NATO members' annual defense budgets would still be there, just like it was during the first Trump administration. When it comes to the U.S. Image or reputation, when it comes to geopolitics, more broadly, sure, there's a lot of discussion here in Taiwan about what President Trump's Ukraine policies might mean should China, in the event that China would attack Taiwan. That's something that's been discussed here, frankly, nearly every single day ever since Russia invaded Ukraine 3 years ago. That's not going to go away. So what I like to say to people here in Taiwan is, you have to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And that means the thing that's most important for Taiwan when it comes to its own defense is to spend and prepare for its own defense and not assume that the United States will come to Taiwan's assistance, because the only person who really knows whether or not the United States will come to Taiwan's assistance is the person who's the president at the time that China attacks Taiwan. So Taiwan needs to do what's ever necessary, including with dramatically more military spending than it currently does, and prepare itself for the eventuality of a war with China without the assumption that the United States will come to its assistance.
Ross Feingold, Alexander Kraev and Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, thank you very much for joining us. We now move to some more news updates. Netanyahu has threatened Hamas with unimaginable consequences if the remaining hostages are not released, warning that a hell plan will be imposed on Gaza to force an agreement. Let's hear what he had to say and what's happening regarding the Gaza ceasefire.
ואני אומר לחמאס, אם לא תשחררו את חטופינו, יהיו לכך השלכות שאתם לא יכולים לדמיין.
إن سلوك الاحتلال وخروقاته للاتفاق خلال المرحلة الأولى تثبت بما لا يدع مجالا للشك بأن حكومة الاحتلال كانت معنية بانهيار الاتفاق. تأتي قرارات نتنياهو الأخيرة باعتماد المقترحات الأمريكية لتمديد المرحلة الأولى من الاتفاق وفق ترتيبات مخالفة لما تم الاتفاق عليه، والتي نعتبرها محاولة مفضوحة للتنصل من الاتفاق والتهرب من الدخول في مفاوضات المرحلة الثانية.
The first phase of the ceasefire ended, but talks on its future have hit an impasse after 6 weeks of relative calm in the Gaza Strip that included exchanges of Israeli and Palestinian captives, an influx of badly needed aid.
הגיע הזמן לתת לתושבי עזה בחירה אמיתית. הגיע הזמן לתת להם את החופש לצאת, והגיע הזמן לתת להם את החופש לבחור. הנשיא טראמפ הציג חזון אמיץ וחדשני על חופש הגירה מעזה, וזהו חזון שאפשר, אני חושב שצריך, לא אפשר, שצריך לתמוך בו. אנחנו תומכים בו באופן מלא, והחזון הזה יאפשר עתיד אחר לאזור.
The dispute came as Arab leaders meet for a summit in Cairo to hash out a plan for Gaza's reconstruction to counter a widely condemned proposal from US President Donald Trump. Both Israel and Hamas have accused each other of violating the terms of the truce, which has largely held since it began on 19th January. Time will reveal what post-war Gaza will look like, what proposals Arab leaders will put forward, and whether true peace will be achieved. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from the world of business. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world's largest chip maker, pledged $100 billion in fresh funds to build factories in the United States. TSMC Chief Executive Officer C.C. Wei joined Trump at the White House to unveil the company's vision for expanding a US footprint that got its start in 2020 during the president's first term. Trump said the move means the most powerful AI chips in the world will be made right here in America. Prada is close to acquiring the business founded by Gianni Versace for nearly 1.5 billion euros, Bloomberg News reports. After strong growth last year, Prada is seeking expansion while Versace is struggling with losses. The merger could challenge the dominance of French luxury conglomerates. Melania Grippo, an analyst at BNP Paribas, notes that Versace's brand requires restructuring and has a history of management with no easy fix. However, UBS analyst Susie Talabay believes the acquisition would drive growth, with Versace's 2025 revenue forecasted to reach $810 million. Goldman Sachs warns of downside risks to oil prices due to higher crude supply, weaker US activity, and escalating tariffs. The bank forecasts that Brent crude oil will range between $73 and $78 per barrel in 2025 to 2026, with an expected fluctuation between $70 and $85. Meanwhile, West Texas Intermediate oil is projected to average between $68 and $74 per barrel. The bank also sees risks to its 1.1 million barrels per day oil demand growth forecast for 2025. Swiss chocolate maker Lindt & Sprüngli reported slightly better than expected full-year operating profit despite historically high cocoa prices. Analysts predict a tough 2025 for the chocolate industry due to unprecedented raw material costs. These costs are expected to drive further price hikes in the teens percentage. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosts a high-level summit, positioning the UK as a bridge in Ukraine peace talks. With Europe taking a stronger role amid US policy shifts, Starmer pushes for unity. But will these talks bring real progress? Let's take a look at the full report.
PM Keir Starmer hosts a Ukraine summit in London with 18 world leaders, positioning the UK as a key diplomatic player.
And, Mr. Speaker, it was a productive summit. Together we agreed a clear strategy that the United Kingdom, France and our allies will work closely with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting, which we will then discuss directly with the United States.
Leaders agree on a 4-point plan for a sustainable peace in Ukraine, marking a unified global stance. Zelensky attends amid tensions with Trump. European leaders show strong support, boosting his diplomatic standing. Starmer positions the UK as a bridge between the US and Europe, strengthening transatlantic ties in the peace process. UK and France call for increased defense spending and a peacekeeping coalition to secure a Ukraine ceasefire.
We recognise that Ukraine is fighting for her survival and fighting to have the same freedom, democracy and sovereignty which all of us here enjoy. That is why both the opposition and the government are fully committed to supporting Ukraine and President Zelensky. I was also glad to see His Majesty the King welcome President Zelensky at Sandringham. As I said at the weekend, President Zelensky is a hero. He is a symbol of the bravery of the Ukrainian people. There are, of course, many areas where the Prime Minister and I disagree, but now is the time for us to discuss where we do agree.
Starmer's foreign policy boosts the UK's global standing, marking a shift in post-Brexit diplomacy. Europe takes a lead role in Ukraine as the US position shifts, with Trump criticising European leaders. As war continues, the UK reaffirms its commitment to peace, solidifying its role on the world stage. Bureau Report NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from across the Indo-Pacific region. North Korea has slammed the United States for political and military provocations. This comes as a US Navy aircraft carrier visits the South Korean airport of Busan. Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, stated that as soon as its new administration appeared this year, the US has stepped up the political and military provocations against North Korea. She later added that if the US continued their demonstrations, we will be naturally compelled to renew its records in the exercise of strategic deterrence. A heavily populated stretch of Australia's eastern coast prepares for a tropical cyclone that could be the most powerful in 50 years. Cyclone Alfred is swirling about 550 kilometres east of a major city, Brisbane, with models showing it veering towards the mainland later in the day. The Bureau of Meteorology forecaster Dean Narramore said that the storm was likely to cross the coast, striking land between metropolitan Brisbane and tourist haven Sunshine Coast. A Philippine Air Force fighter jet with 2 pilots on board has gone missing during a night combat assault. The assault was in support of ground forces who were battling insurgents in a southern province of the country. The FA-50 jet lost communication with other Air Force aircraft around midnight during the tactical mission before reaching a target area. Officials say that they have started an extensive search and hope to find the aircraft and the pilot soon. A North Korean soldier captured by Ukraine pleads to live a normal life after moving to South Korea. This comes after Seoul vowed to offer citizenship to troops from Pyongyang in January. Seoul's National Intelligence Service confirmed that the Ukrainian military had captured 2 of around 10,000 North Korean soldiers. It's estimated that the troops were sent by Kim Jong-un to fight for Moscow in their war against Kyiv. South Korean lawmaker Yoo Yong-won said that he was able to meet the 2 soldiers who remain in Ukrainian custody. The moment faced the 2 prisoners, I was overwhelmed with emotions and in its sense of empathy, said Yoo in a press conference. And that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.